Get funky. What's up, guys? This is Rizzi here at LMT Studios on a Hog Blog. I'm gonna go through one of these new tracks that's a work in progress with me and a buddy of mine, that's on my new label, MLC Records. Play a little clip for you guys real quick, and then go through it and break it down a little bit for you guys.
Poor man trying not to choke.
So that's the trap version of it, and then later on there's a dubstep breakdown. I'll show you that part too. So that's pretty much where it's at right now. Still got some work to do it and can track down some more vocals, but it's pretty much the gist. So on this one little stab trick that I like to do, there's this little stab chord here for the break, this part right here. One thing that I like to do to really make that chord stand out is to sidechain it to its own track so that I can control when it's actually the sidechain compressor is being affected. I put a really quick attack on it, and then I play with the release time so that it's being pushed down right when it initially comes in, and it kind of flows upward. It makes like a pumping effect. Sometimes people don't want to hear the pumping and breathing of the compressor, but in this case I like to use it so it kind of like pushes it into your face. So it's like an element that's part of the track, and then it comes in and brings out like its own stab. So I'll show you if you can hear the difference on there without the compressor on here. And I also have a filter, actually, a high pass filter flowing in from the toggle and the bottom as well. So I'll take off both of those. You can hear the difference. Those are just the chords. Put on an active high pass filter on it, so it's cutting out most of the frequencies and then letting them come all in as the sound progresses, as well as being pushed up by the sidechain compressor. Really makes a big difference as it's bringing in the sound. The 808s and everything I made all myself in Massive, as I do for all of my sounds. I threw a sidechain compressor on there as well, because you have to with an 808. I have the kick layered on top of the 808, but it's still compressing it, so it gives the room for the kick to still stand out. This one sound right here that took me quite a while to make. Pretty hard sound to make. I'm using a saw wave, the intensity all the way up. I just pitched it down. I put a second envelope on it for it to actually go up gradually, the pitch of it, and then I put another, I automated the pitch going down as it's rising up as well to get the bottom end of the sound moving. So you get the top end that gives it the characteristic it's building up in pitch, and then the bottom end is being dragged down and gets the like the grit at the bottom of the sound. See, without the pitch down, it's just you just hear the first envelope that's on it, and I pitched it down 3 octaves after, so you get the bottom end. It's like a winding, and I didn't put any reverb or anything like that on it, because when you start adding the reverb and pushing it out, you're not getting that clean, like crisp sound of it, like winding down everything. So what I do tend to do a lot of is building the stereo width as I go through each track. A lot of people tend to put that off to the end, but I find it hard to get the frequencies to lie where you want when you don't do your stereo width, because, you know, you may have a sound that later on you push out to the sides as just, you know, some filler for the sides of the speakers, but then when you do that, you're left with no middle of those frequencies, or maybe even vice versa. You know, you put something, you know, off to the side and it's conflicting with another frequency that you have already. So I find it really helpful if you do all your stereo width as you're building each sound, and even building the sound as much as possible as you go. I do my limiting and multiband compressing, saturating, like all that stuff on each track as I build it to get a more concrete way of my track. You know, what the finishing touches, you know, will be that I have to make. If you leave it all up in the air, a lot of times you get a lot of, you know, tracks going in here and a lot of sounds going, and you kind of get an idea of what you want, but then you try to do all the stereo width and like EQing and all that stuff in the final stages, and it throws away the whole vision that you had on your actual track. So definitely something I recommend doing is putting the time in to, you know, try to complete each noise as you know, see it in your mind as you're going, because if not, you may lose the whole feel of the track later on.
But like not getting too carried away with the little.
Oh, of course, yeah. Because I mean, I could sit here for, you know, 10 hours making one sound, but then I lose the whole thought process. You know, that's what I'm saying. Like, as much as possible, you know, it does help. In Ableton, a good way to get to not be, you know, to not let that affect you too much is by freezing tracks inside of Ableton. What it does is it basically makes like a temporary audio file of the whole track, so you can't affect it because it's like stationary, like an audio file, but it's not a destructive way of doing it. It's undestructive, so it won't.
It's not bouncing it out, but
Correct. It's keeping, like, look, I'll show you.
I don't know. I don't use Ableton, but I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah. Like for instance, this ARP right here that I have going, if it were taking up too much time, or, you know, too much CPU, I would literally right click. It would stop the audio. It's gonna freeze it now and not let me use.
It's like a mini render.
It's like a temporary audio file that it creates of the track. So if you have, you know, like what I was saying is like this ARP, I'm not gonna do anything else to it. It's gonna stay by itself. So that sounds set in stone. I'm good. I don't need to do anything else to it. So I can freeze it. Yeah, freeze it. Put it to the side. It's not gonna mess with my CPU, or, you know, not as much. And, you know, because the CPU, it's trying to, all the plugins and everything that you put on your tracks, it's trying to process all that at one time. So it's, you know, it's spazzing out. You do this, you freeze the track, and it's like you're making an audio file. Now, I don't personally like to make destructive, like, solid audio files. Some people do. I personally don't, because if I have to change something in it, I'd like to go back and be able to fix that. But this is a great thing that Ableton has to offer, is the temporary, you know, the freezing of the track. A lot of people don't use that, but it's a really great thing to take a hold of inside this program. We have a kick and snare. There's two kicks and two snares layered together. We have some hi-hats going on, some other snare rolls that are a completely different snare than the one that's going on mainly. And most of the rest of the stuff in the background, we have some lasers going on and stuff, and mostly like chants, like this chant right here. I threw some reverb on there and a dimension expander to kind of push it off to the side. That's another thing. Like, I like to keep my drums mostly, you know, mono, with a little bit maybe of reverb on the snare and stuff like that. But most of the drums, at least for the kick and snare and like the hi-hats, I like to keep them in the center, so they can right there make up the whole width, you know, the whole frequency range right there mono, and then putting like chants and all that stuff in the background, very reverbed out, with a sidechain compressor on there as well to help it move in the groove of and the tempo of the track. And like that's another reason right there. Like I was saying, if you don't do that kind of stuff, that stereo width as you're doing it, if I were to push out now, though, that chant in the background and let the reverb take up, all the sides of the speaker, if I do that later on down the line, I may not have, I've been listening to that with my drums all in mono, so now it's going to sound completely different. My drum pattern may be really thin and not take up enough of the frequency range of my track being in mono. So that's another thing that I have to go back and fix now. I do this straight from the beginning. I've at least because I envisioned it that way. So I put it off to the sides and sidechain compress it, and I don't have to worry about that. I create all my own sounds inside of Massive. I find that Massive really can let me do whatever it is that I need to do. I mean, I do deep house, glitch hop, electro, dubstep, drum and bass, and all of those sounds I've been able to make, with my own style, of course, but all through Massive. I found it's really my go-to plugin for pretty much everything. For most of the effects, I do use I use some Brainworks stuff. I really like the stock reverb and all the stock effects that are inside of Ableton. I find that anything that I need to do, I can use those with. Limiter, I like to use the L3. I put that on pretty much all of my tracks. The H compressor is one thing that I go to, but I do find it's a little bit bassy, it has a little bit too much low end characteristic when it's compressing things. So I use that, sparingly. Another compressor that I like to use is the C comp. I mean, it's similar, but with a little bit more transparency to it. The LA2A is a good one for drums that I use a lot. And vocals as well. It's a really quick compressor that gives a nice, clean, transparent sound as well. That's pretty much it as far as plugins that I use. I don't tend to use that many plugins. I focus more on just getting clarity and EQing, like just with stock stuff. Like even the stock saturator I use on almost all of my tracks. I've just I feel like it's better to go more into like developing your own sound no matter what plugins you use versus trying to find the best plugin to use here and there. Like I feel like you can use almost any plugin to do what you want as long as you understand it. Yeah, so like I said, I do all my own mastering. I do use this studio here for my mastering. I first go into this stereo width, this Edison stereo width rig right here. I use this. I cross-reference them between these two different near-field monitors and the mains that are here as far as getting my stereo width, and then I go from there into this SSL board just to get the hardware EQ feel out of it. I may EQ a little bit, but not too much. It's just to drive the analog signal from the board and just to get that its own characteristic out of this board. I print it right back into Pro Tools, and then I use the XL limiter. I think it's from Brainworks. I use the XL limiter. I use another stereo width plugin inside of here. The center from who's the center from? From Waves. It's a center plugin from Waves. I use that. Yeah, just a couple other, maybe a little bit of saturation as well, and a little more. I use Ozone as a multi-band compressor. I don't really do any limiting or anything in there because I use the XL. I love the way the XL is, and it gives me a lot of control. There's a sidechain option on there as well that helps out too. So yeah, pretty much I use 2 of the hardware units in here, and then go back in for the rest of the stuff that's in the box for my mastering. Alright guys, so this has been here in the studio at Elementy Studios. My name is Rizzi and you're on Hog Blog. Thanks.